Hello everyone, welcome to week 6. And week 6, just as a brief reminder right off the bat, your environmental analysis paper is due. And the purpose of this video here will be to outline the virtual lab that we will be using this week to help you with the discussion forum. So let's come down here and we're going to take a look at week 6, in which we'll be using some of the business intelligence or BI software, otherwise known as Business Analyst Online. And we've been familiar with this the past week or two. So we're going to be building upon that and ultimately using this to give you some insight to help you answer or respond to the discussion forum. So if we start off with our steps here, let's go ahead and open up this document. Go ahead and open up our document here. When that gets opened, I'll be right back with you. Okay, so your document should look just like mine, but what we'll be using this lab for is to use Business Analyst to get you familiar, a little bit more familiar and competent with the software itself, and then looking at different variables and criteria. Those were things that we talked about last week in week 5. And so there is no report or anything or any product for this virtual lab, but as I mentioned, we'll be using some of our skills in this virtual lab to help you respond to the week 6 forum right down here below. So once you have your week 6 virtual lab up, we'll be looking at consumer trends. It's starting to explore those consumer trends with respect to variables, in other words, our data layers, and then our criteria, which will be the metrics or our numbers that we will be interested in querying out of those data layers. But we'll get more into that. So let's go ahead and click on our arcgis.com link here. And if you do that, you will be prompted here with your account login. So let's go ahead and sign in for that. And I'm looking at number 4 on our virtual lab guide. And this is again going to be not your SMU login. This is instead going to be your ESRI login that you received from ESRI. And so we've been through that before, and I'm going to go ahead and log in my credentials. They'll be a little bit different than yours. And what I'll do here is provide a brief overview of this of this virtual lab, and then I'll pause and I'll actually step you through this. So for the folks that want me to step you through this, we'll go ahead and continue the video. And for others, if you want to do it on your own, you can cut that off here, but we'll go in and just make sure everybody knows generally what to do and where to go. So now that we are logged in, I'm on number 6 of the virtual lab guide. And we're going to go ahead and click on this little app launcher button up here. Let's go ahead and push that. And then let's come down to the business analyst option. If anyone does not have access to the business analyst option, please let me know and we'll make sure that we get that squared away for you. So let's go ahead and open up our business analyst. And that is also shown in number 7. And once we are at the business analyst page here, you may be prompted to enter your login credentials again, and those will be the same ESRI login credentials that you just used. But if you logged in directly, just like I did here to business analyst, we will be now looking at number 9 here on our lab guide, on our virtual lab guide. So you may be prompted to create a new project, similar to what is shown down below here, where it'll say create project right here. And what we can do for that is you can create a new project, and you may want to call it week 6 virtual lab. That way this will always be stored in your ArcGIS Online account that you can click on and go back into. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to see if I have that project saved. Doesn't look like I do, so I'm going to see here if I can create a new project with you, and then I'll be right back. All right, everyone. If you do not see the screen that I have right here, you may need to go up to the Home tab and then Maps, and you'll be then prompted to create a new project. So for me, let's go ahead and we'll do that so you could follow along. Hopefully yours came right up. And I'm going to call mine Week 6 Virtual Lab. And this is, again, just a name of a project, like a file that you'll be able to come back into and access at any time. So I'm going to call mine Week 6 Virtual Lab and then simply say create. So as this is being created, as we take a look at number 10, you will see a project screen. And in this project screen, you will see some GIS features, or some geographic information system features. And the cool thing about GIS is there will be three primary features that we will use to represent reality. So what GIS is that we are using digital data to represent reality and also then use those features to attach data to that we can make some understanding out of with things that we otherwise wouldn't be able to see. So let's go ahead and go into this week 6 virtual lab. I'm going to go in here, and one of those, of the three features that I was just referring to, the big three, if you walk out of this class and you can remember, okay, GIS consists of points, lines, and polygons, that's a really good thing to remember. So something like points would be things like customers, point locations, features that might be represented as lines. Line features or linear features would be roads, utility lines, things like that. Polygons, those examples are not really an example, but the features that are listed here would be things like sales territories, zip codes, census blocks, census tracts, your market areas, your competition areas. So those are examples of polygon features. So points, lines, and polygons. Those are the big three things that we can represent in reality. And that's what I'm talking about in number 10, is that once we have all those features, points, lines, or polygons, we can then attach attribute data to those. And that attribute data is really built into the system here for us to use, but point locations, polygons, whether it's census tract information, that will contain attributes, in other words, information about that feature that will be contained within that feature that we can analyze. So census tracts might be total population, might be number of dollars spent at sporting goods stores. So your customer location attributes could be, or your customer attributes could be samples or an example of address, how much money they spent at your for your products. So anything that acts to define or give you information about what that feature would entail is called an attribute. So those are all listed here. So in number 11, we're going to go ahead and close this here. And let's go ahead and take a look at what's next here in our step. So for those of you who want to continue on with this, if we come down here, we looked at our points, lines, and polygons. This references week 4, but it was from another lab there. But so we're going to go ahead and actually step you through this. So right now, I'm going to open up a new document right now in case you're at home. We're going to say stop now if you wish to go through the lab on your own. Continue. Here, I'll not waste your time here. So I'll type that in and be back with you in a minute. So for folks that are following along, we gave you a little overview, a lead in to get you started to create a project in your Business Analyst Online. And really where we will be starting to move forward with the tutorial is really right here, is to create maps from data and then create your color-coded maps selection. And from here on out, it's basically following the directions. I provide some little samples and scenarios, so it's not super lengthy nor complicated, but nonetheless, if you want to go through this on your own, stop now. If you wish to go through the lab on your own and follow the tutorial guide. If you do that, please know that we do not have an application activity due this week. There is not one assigned because your environmental paper you'll be working on is due this week. So stop now and continue on your own. Otherwise, if you would like to follow along with me and go through a little dialogue of the steps and what it is that we're doing, feel free to hang out with me and we'll go through that. So I'll give you a minute, decide what you want to do. Okay, if you are still with me, welcome aboard. And let's go through and step through each one of these, I guess, directions here that I have in here for you one by one, and we'll talk through what it is that we're doing. So right now we're going to go into the create maps from data, which is right here. So make sure that your maps tab is activated and then create maps. And then we are going to select color-coded maps. Just like shown here, color-coded maps. So that will look just like the graphic right here. So create maps. And once we are inside of that, let's open this back up. And you'll see that one of the cool things that comes up for us here is to create or to choose a variable to map. And this is all pre-canned data. We're going to be looking at polygons in here, polygons of census tracts or zip codes or block groups. That all will change depending on how far we zoom in or out. So we'll do some demonstrations of that as we're going through this. So variables, recall, I think I have that here. Just going to flip over on my guide. You might have yours up at home there to look at, but variables, again, are data layers. So when we're talking about variables, we're talking about variables. Variables define what we might put together in an analysis. So let's say we are trying to determine to build a profile. We'll be doing that in week 7 to build a business profile or a consumer profile rather of who are the consumers that might be interested in our product line. So that will consist of different variables. So variables for us will be different data layers. So for example, that might be age. Age will be a variable. Income might be a variable. Maybe it is education level might be a variable. When we integrate all of those variables together, that is when we can conduct an analysis. So in some of your business analyst preparation courses, tutorials that you've worked on in the past, I think you are able to see that overlay analysis potential, and that's really the power of the geospatial or the location intelligence or the location analytics platform. But that was a number 12 on your guide there. Just wanted to talk about the variables for that. So let's go ahead and take a look at number 13. And I'm going to come back over here just so that you can see where I'm at here, but a nice little selection of variables that you can go in there and search as many times as you want and play with this data. So as I'm going through here, we're trying to stick to the script a little bit just so that it's a little more fluid in moving you through things. But by all means, pause this, take a break, go explore all the data that you want, and you can always delete your data sets out of there, out of your business analyst. But now, for example, we're going to be working with doing some comparisons with USA and Canada, looking at trends in age and income, just big picture things. But before we get into that, I wanted to show you a little sample run through of how you can use a custom search of these variables. And one of the things that I did here just to illustrate was to create a search here of, let's say you're interested in the area of Rochester, Minnesota. I lived there for quite a number of years, and it was interesting to look to see how different people in different areas of the city would have different, I guess, preferences, and they had, whether it's housing or whether it was things they like to do or whether it was restaurants they like to go to. One of the things that you can look at with trends are to study, let's say, Android versus iPhone ownership. And so we wanted to look at a little visual trend of these in the Rochester area. So I thought, oh, we'll put this in here for you to give an idea of what are some things that we could explore with our variables with a little custom search. So let's go ahead and follow along with this. And so we're going to click on, actually, we're going to search. We're going to create a custom search of a smartphone. So let's go ahead and do that in our variable box. So we're going to run a search for a smartphone. So right up here in this variable, I'm going to create or actually search for a smartphone. Let's go ahead and then hit enter. And so this is the year 2019, a market potential, people that either have a smartphone that isn't categorized by way of type or brand. So just simply the number, the percent, and an index. I usually like to go just with our number here, but here's a source of some of our data for all of these. But let's go ahead and we're going to bring both of these two variables into our map so that we can look at them. So I'm going to select Android. I think that was the first one that we had on our list here, or on our number 13, but I'm going to pause and then double check that and be right back with you. Okay, so in taking a look at number 13, we come back over here, wanted to search for a smartphone, which we did, and let's go ahead and explore Android first. And then we'll come back and we'll take a look at iPhones and then look at some of the I guess the patterns that we can see perhaps emerging in Rochester. So if you want to work ahead a little bit, we can also explore both the iPhone and the Android together in the same time by clicking on the add variable button here that I have defined. And but otherwise, right now I'm just going to load one in at a time here. So I just selected the Android at first. Even though I have an iPhone, we'll go ahead and look at the Android. So that's what we're looking at here. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to use my zoom in tool here, or just use my zoom in. Let's go ahead and do that. So select your zoom in tool, and I'm going to draw a little box. So I'm going to left click with my mouse and draw a little box, and then let off of my left mouse button here, and let's zoom into Rochester. So Rochester, we are located here in the southern part of Minnesota. Here's the St. Mary's Winona campus. Minneapolis will be just up here, but I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. Again, left click, hold down, drag a box, and then we'll be zooming in a little bit more. Now what's happening is our data is becoming more refined as we zoom in. Remember, we were talking about how important scale was. And right now, we are at just as you move your cursor around, you can see block group right there. So it says block group, and that's the smallest, most homogeneous polygon area that we have access to for demographic data. So this is really important because if you're an analyst and you are trying to find the most like-minded people who are clustered by way of the census data, if you're trying to find the most homogeneous populations that are alike for maybe target marketing or branding, outreach, things like that, you might be really interested in block groups to maximize your overall efficiencies. Because if you're looking for like-minded people, you wouldn't want to use something like a zip code because it's not the demographics or the census data is not made for trying to create profiles and things like that of like-minded or more people that are alike. They're made for mailing, so very heterogeneous populations inside of zip codes. But as we get into facts and block groups, we're going to find that the people in there are going to be more alike in their preferences, incomes, housing, things like that. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about different building profiles and whatnot. So I'm going to use my little mouse up here and click on the pan and zoom. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And I'm just going to left click and then hold down, and I can move this around to see what I'm looking at. But once I have Rochester centered here, here's the city of Rochester, and I'm looking at specifically in my zoom extent here in my viewing window. As I look at that, some things that should jump out to you. So areas up here in the northwest, high number of Android phone ownership up here. So that's saying for us, the darker the area, the greater the number of people that own Android phones. There are some areas to the south and a little bit to the east, but in and around downtown Rochester, down in the southwest or even northeast up here, there's not a lot of Android dominant areas. So let's go ahead and explore what our iPhone looks like. So I'm going to select add this variable up here. And I'm going to go ahead and click then on the iPhone. Okay, so we'll pull this information in here for the iPhone. And what we'll do here, this is looking at both iPhones and Androids together. And before we do that, I'm just going to stop here and I'm going to remove using this. Well, I'll explain what we're looking at here in just a minute. But I'm going to remove the Android because remember where we were before. All this area up in here was pretty heavily dominated by Android. I just want to see Apple or iPhones just by itself. And so now what we're looking at here are iPhone ownership, and you can see the number of people that own iPhones. And it looks like the number in the greatest census block groups here are the highest was 1,900. And I think with Android, the highest number of people, at least in 2019, that owned Androids were still not quite as high as this, if I remember right, but you could go back in and add data, explore that a little bit. But we're seeing some more pockets of higher ownership of iPhones in and around the southwest a little bit more. That ownership was picking up, maybe a little bit more up here in the north east as well. So, but the Northwest seems to be pretty saturated with smartphone ownership, but we're picking up some more iPhone ownership. So what this would tell you, if you were working on branding or marketing in areas that you wanted to increase smartphone ownership, for example, these areas are really, really soft. Either that might be because it's these block groups are very business focused, they might have maybe Mayo Clinic or whatever in there, or the demographics of those people may not be as interested in smartphones. That could be age related. We don't know. I'm just generalizing, making that up now for just to give you an idea of what questions can you begin to ask now about that. So let's go ahead and add that variable back in here of our Android brand. And as that comes back in here, I want to pull us along here to see where we are. And so we've been using the zoom in tools and looking at census blocks, and we talked a lot about that. And let's see here, work through the change variables. So just trying to pull you along there. We're really going through number 14 on that and talked about what the data looked like. So we worked up through 14 and looking at both of those together, let's go ahead and that's what the graphic that we looked at, we had it before, and that's what this looks like now. So we're looking for having a smartphone, an Android. It's kind of fun just to compare these. So where we're looking at the darker the circle, if we hold our mouse over those circles, here we could see that the iPhone and Android have some comparisons there. If we move over here, we're seeing in each one of these block groups here, the ownership. So in this particular block group right here, there's a greater number of iPhones than Android ownership. Same thing with this block group. Same thing with the block group located up here. So just moving your cursor around, you can see that the darker the circle, if you will, would mean more people have ownership of that, but of a smartphone for sure, but more than likely also the way that the scale shows us here in color also is a very high number of iPhone ownership. So as the circles become less colorful, if you will, or more drab, even some of these areas down here, you're seeing that the Androids may be a little bit more popular when compared together. So that's the lighter colored circles, or the size even as well. So size reflects number of people, and the color references high ownership, a higher number of iPhone with purple, and there's not a whole lot of Android ownership here, but you can see a few of these light colored littler circles that would indicate Android phone ownership. So that's a fun little way. It's a little bit confusing at first when you look at that. So we're only looking at just general usually one variable, and in which case it's kind of fun then just to look at these general trends here in our data. But certainly explore the metro, explore other areas where you grew up. And you could do this with really any type of purchasable product that is found to be contained inside a business analyst. So just because we looked at a color-coded map for smartphones, you can explore any of these. Now, this is not going to contain everything under the sun just because we have a academic license, so they're not going to give us everything, but you'll be surprised by what's in here. So I encourage you to run some general searches, browse all these variables. If we clear out let's come back up here, we'll clear out our search. And we'll browse all variables to see what's in here. So there's education-related demographics, there are behaviors, spending is a really neat one. What are people spending, different types of clothing, entertainment, food, transportation, travel. So, a lot of different recreation. So the idea is here to have a little fun with this and explore. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at, after seeing this, that was kind of a warm-up activity to give you some firsthand sample exploration of just two variables. We looked at iPhones, we looked at Androids, and we looked at them at the same time with these graduated symbols. So this is ordinal data. The bigger the circle, the bigger or the more people that own those phones. Androids, white colored, the iPhones were purple. So that was our warm-up activity. So now in the table of contents, let's select the X button, or the X button, I guess, here, to remove any data that was in our session. So we did that. We just X'd out of those that were there before. And so following along, then in the table, or at the tools in the upper right-hand portion of your screen, we're going to zoom out to the US, to the extent of the US here. So I'm going to use my zoom in or zoom out tools. I'm just going to simply make a little square here, and we'll just zoom out here. We can also use this up here to go to the states. So if we used our zoom out button, we can select states. And that will take us out a little bit further. And again, we have our pan tool to move around, zoom in, zoom out as you wish. So I might see if we can go out a little bit more here. There we go. I just tapped on the little negative button here, and that'll zoom us in, zoom us out. Okay, so maybe if one more. Well, that's okay there. All right. So next up, under the maps, we're going to use again the create maps, and we're going to search for the 2019 median age, and we're going to add that variable. So go ahead and do that. Just like what we're seeing here, we're going to search for the 2019 median age, and then we'll come back and look at these questions right here that I have to give us some thoughts for interest here. So we're looking at the 2019 median age. You can run a search for that, up in the window, just like what we did for the smartphones. You could run search for median age, or we have this category right here that I'm going to go into. Let's look at the median age. Just going to pull my notes up here so I can see this while I'm typing along with you here. So 2019 median age. Okay, so under number 18 is where we are here. So with the median age, it's fun to just see what's going on here with our data. And as we look around, we can see the general median age is very, the reds here are 42 to 45 approximately here. And so we can see the where some of the younger and older populations are, at least with respect to the year of 2019. Now, what's interesting here is let's go ahead and take a look. In my notes there, you'll see there's a little red box in the second graphic I refer to. If we come down below, this is what I'm referring to. These are the dates, census or demographic data for each one of our states by way of median age. So go ahead and click on a couple of these and look to see what's happening. So we have Montana with a slightly higher median age, but let's go ahead and look at 2010 data. When we talk about trend analysis, this is really what we need. We need a starting point, and usually this is defined by a purpose. You know, we have to have a purpose for what it is we're trying to do here. But if we look at the 2010, we still see the state of Montana relatively unchanged. But let's go ahead and look to see what is changing. So over maybe about 9 or 10 years, I'm going to jump back to current. We see that some states stayed the same, others changed a little bit. And explore some of your data as to why that is. So 41.5 in Pennsylvania in 2019. Okay, so it didn't change a lot there, but relatively speaking, if we look at 2024, this is projectable or projections in our data. We can see where there are areas with a higher or an older median age, and here in Florida, it's projected to go up as well. Well, let's go ahead and zoom in on Florida here, just for fun. This isn't in our notes or anything. We're just doing this for a little fun. And again, as we zoom in, we're going to see our resolution change in terms of our data. So here we're looking at polygons at a county level. You know, you can see that right with the tab, county level. If you zoom in a little bit further, you will get census tracts and then census blocks too. But here we can look to see what's happening in Florida, for example. Over a 14-year period, let's go back to 2010. Did anything change? Okay, let's go to 2024. So not a whole lot of change here, actually. It's kind of surprising. I'm going to zoom out to our states again. Let's come up to Minnesota. We'll do that same thing. Again, this is not in our notes. This is just for a little bit of fun here. Use my zoom in tool, zoom into Minnesota, and select my pan tool, and move around. So let's go ahead and take a look to see how this is changing or how it has changed over the past 15 years approximately or so. So I'm going to go back to 2010, jump up to 2024 where the projections are supposed to go. So seeing some areas where the median age is changing a little bit, even down along the south Minnesota, Iowa border and out west in Dakotas. So a lot of these general, I guess, easy to view data is really kind of fun to look at and think about. You know, is the age changing dramatically? Didn't appear to be so a great deal, but how are lifestyle choices encouraging some of those areas to change with age? So when you get into the discussion forum, you may want to zoom into some areas like we've been doing here in the US and even in Canada, as that's the next step that we'll be moving into to begin to explore different regions. Are more people flocking to the south? Are more people flocking to the east? What's happening with the age of our population as a whole in the nation? Do we see any big trends or patterns in that from a big picture perspective? So that's really what we're aiming at here with this. So next up, let's move down to 19, and we'll zoom out to the states just as what we did before, and there'll be a drop down in the upper right hand part of our window, and we're going to change this from US to Canada. And we're going to click on that, and we are going to select the total population median age for Canada, just like what we did for the US. Now, Canada might not have the 2019 median age, so we'll have to use the closest data set that we have for that. But let's go ahead and do that. All right, so let's zoom out here to states, just so we can see big picture again. Select my pan tool. I'm just going to move here a little bit. Okay, now under our drop-down arrow up here, oh, I'm sorry, not there. I'm sorry, up here, the US, up at the US here, we'll select Canada. So either search for that or select the letter C, and then we'll select Canada. So now you'll notice that Business Analyst resets our scale to Canada, and some of this data may take a little while to come in here. Give that just a minute to get set. But now let's go ahead and search for our age in Canada. And so the closest that we had, we didn't have, again, exactly 2019. It's just the closest that the system does have are the 2018 total population mean age, or median age. So let's go ahead and double click on that. And now what I encourage you to do is to zoom in and look at some of these areas, explore them, what's changing. But what's also pretty neat is they have projections out to 2028. So this is kind of fun to look at, and I'm not expecting a ton of change here, but let's just look at it from 2013 to something of 15 plus years out. So not a whole lot of change, but again, Canada's very land rich and population poor, so to speak. So we may want to zoom in and explore some of these areas in 2018. Let's go back to, let's zoom in around, we'll pick Ontario here and look at some areas in and around Ontario, see if we can get some more refined data. Now, being that this is a different country, we may not have the exact, for example, zip codes, census tracts, census block groups. So here they're called census divisions that you can see. So what might be interesting for you is to look to see where are people moving to in and out of over the course of these years in Canada, and how does that compare and contrast with the US? So if we look at 2013, just in and around, the north, it'll be the southeast part of Canada here. Let's see what age projections may be expected to change a little bit. So not a whole lot here, but maybe we want to look at Vancouver or some other areas of Canada here as well. So I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. So we are at the limitation of the Canadian data here, so we'll have to do our best with what we have. But explore some of the areas, maybe in and along the border, Vancouver, Winnipeg, Toronto. Those might be good ones to look at just to see, where are people moving? And that in general is part of the virtual preparation lab to get you really tuned in. We kind of went through 19 here, looked at some of the different age groups, but again, zoom in on areas. We'll look at those. and think about that and how you respond with those age and patterns for the US and Canada, maybe currently and maybe into the future. But again, we're looking at a trend. So go back to the oldest, look to the furthest projection, and with current to see what's just in general happening. There's no, I don't think, really a precise answer. It's just generally speaking, what are you seeing with any trends between the two countries? So that's a little overview on week 6 here for you on the virtual lab and getting you dialed into the discussion forum here, the community forum here for that. So if anybody has any questions on anything like related to the week 6 virtual lab or how I can help you a little bit more, please let me know. Otherwise, again, there's no application activity. Have a great week, and we'll look forward to seeing you back for week 7. So thanks a lot, everyone.